In order to make your linear lay-in, you're going to get a nice piece of smooth white Bristol board. I will give you a packet of newsprint, a newsprint folder with a piece of this graphite paper inside. We keep it inside the newsprint so that it protects it from getting everything else around it dirty. The first thing we do is put our name on the back of this sheet of paper in all capital letters with our period number on it. We're going to flip that sheet over so that this is the front. The next thing we want to do is transfer our image that we got from the computer lab onto this white sheet of paper. So I take my graphite paper dark side down so that the graphite is facing the white sheet, and I put my image that I have printed right over it. Notice that the image has 0.25-inch margins on it. After that, I'm going to take my roll of tape, and I want to tape the corners, the upper right and the upper left corners, so that nothing moves. Tape it down here and tape it down here. I'm going to make a tape tab by rolling the tape over onto itself and putting it on the bottom. This way, I can lift up and see what I'm doing, and it keeps it in place while I'm tracing. So I'm going to take this, and the first thing I want to outline is my border using the ruler. I am going to lift this up, the border up just a smidge, because this is all the same value background, and along this edge. Now, a linear lay-in, contour line drawing, coloring book, outline, those are all the same terms or different terms for the same concept. Basically what you're doing is you want to make a coloring book for yourself, which is just an outline, which is called a contour line, which in this case we call it a linear lay-in. So I start with the dark areas and my horizon line. I always want to start tracing in the background. And I know that here is the fur, so I'm going to use this nice organic line to show myself where the dark part of the fur stops and where the lightness starts. I would prefer to stay tracing inside the darker lines so that when we do go and shade this in with our ebony pencil and blending stumps, that these lines that we traced will fade away. Here's a nice dark collar. There's a shadow in here. So I'm plotting out where I'm going to add shadows and highlights. Where does the shadow start and where does the shadow end? Where does a highlight start? Where does a highlight end? There's some darkness in here. Now this is really light in here, so I don't want to put a big black line, even though I know that the rear end of this dog is different than this background, but there's both white right here. So I'm going to start with just these darker shadows right here. I'm going to plot out some of these little grasses over in here. Just mark those off. Here's a shadow in here. There's a shadow down there that I'm going to trace. I'm going to mark off where this shadow starts here. And I'm going to come around these lighter areas so I know that I can take an eraser and keep those light. And then mark off all here. Now this is the first assignment that we do with 6th graders. We learn about values and how shadows and highlights can make an object, a flat object, look three-dimensional. I let them copy like this, trace something on the first project we do because I think it helps build confidence in our skills. The next project we still use a visual reference, which means from a photograph, but we're going to actually put the rule of thirds grid on it next time and enlarge it in proportion. So right now we're just trying to build confidence, learn how to make a linear lay-in, learn what's important to us to mark off versus not. And I know there's a shadow there, so I'm going to take a peek at this and see if there's enough clues on here for me to shade this in. Right now this drawing looks flat because it is just an outline. As soon as you start adding shadows and highlights, a variety of values is what we call them, as soon as we start adding the variety of values, that's when it's going to build up and look three-dimensional. And I know my white tail ends down in here. And I'm thinking that's pretty good. I've got the face marked off. I know there's this little snout. Here's his eye. There's a shadow in here. There's some fur in here. And now I'm going to use these markings to let me know, oops, I forgot the tongue. There's a dark spot right here. And I'm going to use these markings to let me know where I should shade it in on values 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, and 1. So now that I'm done with my linear lay-in, I'm going to peel the tape away from my image so it doesn't tear it. I keep this out. I'm going to take this piece of graphite paper, put it back inside the newsprint to protect it, put that back in my binder, and now I'm ready to take my ebony pencil and my blending stump, and I'm going to start shading in the background. This is a very light value up here, so really just the blending stump should be able to recreate that. And my sky is indeed horizontal, and I try to recreate the values that I see over in this image. And then after the values come first, form first, and then I go on to the textures. Let's look at my two examples from before. After my linear lay-in, this is the image I chose. Notice it has 1/4 inch margins. I have traced, I did not trace every single one of these rocks because that's just a texture. So now that I have that traced, I'm going to look over here, and then I'm going to try to recreate these values over on my linear lay-in. You can do that for a vertical photocopy, or you can do it for a horizontal photocopy. Again, 1/4 inch margins on here. Trace the linear lay-in. I used a ruler because there were a lot of very straight lines in here, not a lot of organic lines. And then I started again in the background with shading, and I have some of my highlights of the clouds in here. And I started up here. I did all the shading on my tree, and then I added the texture over it. Now you'll see that my texture doesn't look exactly like this texture, but it absolutely suggests that there are leaves in this tree. So you will slowly work, get all your shadows and highlights done first, and then go ahead and add your textures.